Yo, it's game dev time. Today we're diving Today we're diving deep into the creation of immersive environments for Stasis Complex, my upcoming survival horror, metroidvania, action, beat-em-up platformer, puzzle, simulation super game. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of game development, let me take a moment to share my excitement about this project. In this video, we're going to explore how we bring moody and immersive environments to life in our game. Quick tangent though, before we get started, I just want to do a little PSA talking about the previous devlogs. I really was not expecting them to get any traction, and I'm amazed at the responses. Thank you all for leaving such helpful and encouraging messages. Seriously, I had no idea any of the stuff I was working on was going to garner any kind of positive reception, so thank you so much. I'm writing this portion of the video in 2024, but most of this video was written and recorded in 2023, along with the previous two devlogs. I'll cover more about what happened in detail in another update, but for now, thanks for bearing with how messed up the timelines are. Hopefully we can get everything straightened out. Now, let's get started by breaking down some essential concepts in game development, specifically within the Godot engine. You see, in Godot, we work with scenes, but what exactly is a scene? Well, a scene can be thought of as a building block, or a prefab, that makes up various aspects of our game, and we have a choice. We can use composition to create complex elements, or build entire rooms and areas. So for this game, what's the difference between a room and an area? Rooms are specific, containing players, backgrounds, objects, enemies, and more. They connect at their edges, creating a playable and somewhat continuous game world. And then there are areas, which are more abstract, conceptual spaces that group rooms together based on themes. As an example, our game begins in an area called the Pit. Picture it as an enormous system of caves beneath the factory, where everyone dumps their garbage. Over the centuries, a whole trash kingdom has been built up in its depths. Areas like the Pit are like overarching concepts, and rooms are specific building blocks that bring them to life. When a player moves between rooms, it's like turning the pages of a book, each room holding its own unique experience. Now when a room loads, it grabs all the data it needs from resources and configures everything accordingly. It's a bit like an assembly line at a factory. When it comes to designing game rooms, I tend to keep things pretty free form. The first few rooms were born during the brainstorming phase of the original game, and when I revived this project, I dusted off those initial drafts. It was like crafting with digital clay, experimenting with different layers, a true voyage of discovery. As I delved deeper into the world of game development, I uncovered essential techniques for crafting immersive environments. One of these techniques revolves around the manipulation of light values to create the illusion of space. To infuse our game world with a sense of depth, we need to embrace a concept known as atmospheric perspective. This concept became particularly crucial for the scenes in the Pit, where I aimed to convey a sprawling, cave-like system filled with towering junk structures and mountains of debris. To achieve this monumental scale, we must tweak the colors and values of our background assets. Objects that are receding into the distance should gradually take on the hues of the atmosphere, growing lighter, while those that are closer to the camera should darken. As I progressed, connecting rooms filled with random shapes into a cohesive game world, I began to recognize the importance of background elements in creating a captivating scene. I sketched out numerous junk towers with varying brightness levels to populate the backgrounds. Stalagmites became key for foreground depth, and I even dabbled in borrowing elements from sources like Night Cafe. These sources provided a treasure trove of indiscernible junk, ruins, smokestacks, buildings, and more to scatter throughout the background. This was cool for sketching out ideas, but using these generated assets would prove problematic, and we'll cover that more in depth later on. But if we really want to give our game that extra juice, we need to think in layers and introduce the game-changing technique known as parallax scrolling. Here's the deal. First, you create a parallax background node. Out of the box, it has a low layer value, causing it to appear behind everything else. Think of it like the Z layer for canvas item ordering. Then you add a parallax layer as a child. By default, the topmost children are drawn behind the bottommost ones. Parallax is all about the principle that objects further away move less relative to the reference point, which in our case is the camera. So for those distant elements, we set their motion to lower values and gradually increase it as they approach on a 0 to 1 scale. Given that our camera keeps a close watch on the player, foreground objects closer to the camera need to move faster in relation to our protagonist. That's where another parallax background comes in. In my project, it's layer 0. Here we kick the motion above 1.0 as the layers get closer to the camera, creating that dynamic sense of depth. Not too shabby. Next, we gotta look at how we make a room actually playable. For our walking surfaces, we keep things relatively straightforward. We use a static body equipped with a collision polygon to sketch out the shape of the surface. This not only defines the physical boundaries, but also plays a crucial role in our sound design. Each surface is added to a group that describes its material. Metal for metal, footsteps, wood for wooden surfaces, and so on. The player has a raycast pointed downward to look for the ground surface we're currently walking on, and read what group it's in. As you walk or run, the game cues up a footstep sound on specific frames. We've got a dedicated handler that stores all the sound effects for each surface type. When it's time to play a footstep sound, sound or a landing sound, the handler randomly selects the appropriate sound effect from the pool, adding a touch of variation to the auditory experience. So to go from one room to the next, we use these exit colliders to connect rooms together. When you collide with an exit, we pass in the path of the scene to the corresponding room. The exit is like a gatekeeper and tells the room to save all the critical data for itself and everything in it, including the player, into the runtime game state. Then we queue up our transition effect. Once the effect is done, we switch to the room that our exit is pointing to. When the room loads into the scene, it grabs the data from game state and sets it all up. We play the transition in reverse to give us a little bit of visual padding, and because it looks nicer than having everything just appear out of nowhere. The exit also has a string name for something we call an entry point. Think of it as your designated arrival spot within the new room. When a room loads its data, it also checks for the intended entry point, which can be any node, just identified by its name. Typically, we use names like left, right, top, and bottom for straightforward placements. But occasionally, a room might have something weird like a door or something that we come out of in the middle of it. Save points also use save point as the name of the entry point when saving the game, so when you load your save, you appear there instead. In my previous devlog, I covered how we can further set the tone of a room using Canvas Modulate for direct color control over everything. But we can use more effects to enhance our scene. There's this 2D God Rays shader, which is very versatile and easy to use from the Godot Shaders repository. It's very cinematic. Also, we love some Silent Hill around here, so we gotta have good fog. The best fog is pretty easy to achieve. Just get some Perlin noise and scroll the UV. The scroll speed gives it more or less intense wind. To give a radial fade out around the edges, we decrease the alpha value per pixel the further away we are from the center. No, that's not what we do. What we actually are supposed to do to get a better radial fade out is load in a fade mask. I use these textures for light glows in different areas, and they'll work for now. We load this in and sample the alpha channel based on the UV. Looking pretty good. But if you have fog, you gotta have some eerie ambient wind sounds. If you're a 90s kid, you probably remember learning how to do this trick with your hands. Slap some low pass, mess with the EQ, and crank up the reverb, and you've got a really good wind effect. Maybe add a layer of white or brown noise underneath too for good measure. And hey, look at that. Now that's ambience. As I've been working on this game, I've learned a lot about how to use space, light, and control value when trying to create captivating environments and scenes. But one of the most important things, and I wish I could go back in time and beat myself over the head with this, is consistent scale and resolution. Between 2023 and 2024, I spent this last year working mostly on revamping combat, rebuilding the construction and machine mechanics, and most time-consuming of all, redrawing the assets. When I first started the project, I wanted to see what all the hubbub was with this AI image generation nonsense. And for a time, I thought it was pretty cool that I could use this free online tool to generate unique images and references to use as assets in my game. However, I've had a major change of heart when it comes to this stuff. To say nothing of the major ethical concerns and negative impact that AI has had on artists, the actual output here was pretty abysmal. The process of getting a decent image, cutting it up and retouching it in Photoshop, and using it in the game was not actually saving me that much work compared to drawing the assets. I think I was worried because at the time I really wasn't confident in my ability to draw pixel art in the style I was after. But I spent this whole last year training hella at art, and so now I feel like I can actually draw the assets that I need. It takes a long time to build up these skills, but also to really figure out the style and what it is you want. But the biggest thing is that AI output is really inconsistent. It's all over the place in terms of detail, style, and color. So the game ended up looking just completely nonsensical. It just looked like poorly sliced random images that were barely decipherable, and they were all scaled randomly and at different resolutions. This led to a lot of visual clutter, unreadability, and inconsistency that I just couldn't stand to look at anymore. So I've been working tirelessly at going through and removing all the AI assets I could find and redrawing them myself. I think this is making the game look a lot better and much more cohesive visually. The biggest thing is getting this, a scale guide. Finding the size of the player in pixels that they're drawn at and giving myself references at different sizes so I can plan how big to make a canvas when I want to make an asset. It's all relative to the player, which is how it should have been from the get-go. It's important too to draw things at the sizes you need them so you don't have to use the scale tool to size it. Doing so will cause pixels in the sprites to be drawn differently. You want every pixel on every object to be the same size as much as possible. The biggest inspiration visually now is Rain World. Straight up, best pixel art ever, and it's not close.
Don't worry. Don't worry. I'm not gonna do what everyone thinks I'm gonna do. Flip out, man.
I think I can say this with confidence, the environment assets in Rain World is the best pixel art I've ever seen in my life, bar none. So if I can approach even one tiny iota of this level of environment art, I'll be happy. Alright, I think that's gonna wrap it up for today. This has been a really weird development cycle so far. The biggest challenge is just being consistent and persistent with how you use your time, but we're making progress, and I look forward to expanding the game even more. Hopefully someday it won't just be playable, but actually fun and cool. Until then, I hope you'll follow along with me in these devlog videos. If you like this one, be sure to hit the like button and leave a comment, and subscribe to do something, I guess. I think subscribe is obsolete now, you gotta have notifications on or whatever, which honestly, I don't like that. Notifications are annoying, so don't hit the bell icon. The video will get to you if this is the kind of thing that you like to watch. Anyway, thanks again so much for hanging out. Peace.